Hello everyone and welcome to My Class Advisor. Today we'll be taking you through an Excel function which is most commonly used, Vlookup. We'll help you understand what is Vlookup, take you through the syntax of this particular function, share an example where we are applying this function, and finally a few considerations when you're using Vlookup. So, starting off with what is Vlookup? As mentioned before, it's probably one of the most used and popular functions in Excels. It is used to look up value from different ranges and sheets. The name Vlookup is an amalgamation of two terms, V for vertical and lookup for finding the corresponding value. If we break down this function, the function actually performs a vertical lookup for the leftmost column, returns a value in the same row from a column that you specify. Now, looking at the syntax of this function, in order to use this function, we start off with an equal to sign followed by the term Vlookup. Do make sure that the data is organized in a way that the lookup value is to the extreme left and the returning value that you want to find is towards your right. The first element within the function is the lookup value. This is a value that you actually want to look up. This can be in the form of a value or a reference to a cell. The value you want to look up must be in the first column of the range of cells that you specify within the table array. You then include the table array. This is a range in which the Vlookup will actually search for the value that you want to return. The first column in the cell must contain the lookup value. The cell range also needs to include the returning value that you want to find. You then include the column index number. As the name suggests, this field needs to be in a numerical value. It always starts off with 1 since it's the leftmost value that you begin with. Finally, there is range lookup. This specifies whether you want to look up and find an exact match or an approximate match. This value is in the form of a boolean. A boolean means whether the value is true or false. In the case of a true value, it assumes that the first column is sorted either numerically or alphabetically and then searches the closest value attached to it. In case you want to find an exact match, always include the boolean value to be as false. The syntax may be a bit overwhelming. So here's an application of how we use Vlookup, which will help you better understand of how this function actually operates. Here is a data set of a bunch of people with names, sex, age, and date of birth. Now, we want to find what is Rahul's age using the Vlookup function. We have two solutions to this problem. The first approach is using cell references, and the second approach is using unique values within quotes. Let's go through them one by one. Using Vlookup with cell references. To begin the function, we write an equal to sign followed by Vlookup. The first value within the brackets is B8. B8 mentions Rahul, the value that we actually want to look up. We then mention the table array, which is from A1 until D6. This includes the complete table of data that we need. We then mention cell reference B9, which mentions which is a column that we actually want to look up. In our case, we want to find out the age of Rahul, which is in column 3. And finally, for the range lookup, we mentioned false as we want the exact value of Rahul's age. After closing the brackets, we hit enter. you'll notice the response is 42, which is Rahul's age from the Vlookup table. In case you want to Vlookup using actual data instead of cell references, this is how you would approach. Equal to sign, Vlookup. Then the first value within the brackets will be within quotes Rahul, followed by the table array, which is A1 until D6, followed by the column index number, which is 3 in this case, since we are looking up at his age. Do note that we cannot include it within an inverted quotes. This is a numerical value. Finally, we mention false as a range lookup, since we need the exact age of Rahul. We then close the brackets and hit enter. We receive the response the same as in our previous approach as 42, which is Rahul's age. Now that you have a fair bit of understanding of how Vlookup function works in Excel, here are a few considerations that you need to bear in mind when using Vlookup. Vlookups only work when the information that you have, that is the lookup value, is in the first column of the data that you are looking at within the table array. Consider the example of a phone book. You need to start with the name first. You cannot start with the phone number and then find the name. Vlookup is handy when using massive chunks of data. However, it only returns the value of the first match it finds. In case you have duplicate values and there are 100 of possible matches, it will always return the value of the first match it finds. The final consideration you need to bear in mind is that it can only return a value in the table array to the right. It can never go left. There are simple solutions around these problems, but we'll save those for another session. For now, have fun looking up.